Sure, it's verbal abuse, and in fact, for many years, it's been known as verbal abuse. More recently, they've termed it gaslighting. It's kind of like the new buzz term, so to speak. It's based off the 1944 movie Gaslight with Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer, and it really is a sense of the gaslighter eliciting control over the other party. And they do it in very subtle ways. Example, in that movie, the husband is actually keeps turning down the light, so it's a gas light, keeps turning it down, and the wife is thinking, well, why is it getting darker in here? And he keeps telling her, no, that's your imagination. So that's really a key ploy of what they do, is keep telling you, no, it's all in your mind. It's not real. You're imagining this. There's something wrong with you. That is one ploy that they use. The other ploy, which really happened to me, is the isolation. And they slowly keep you from your family. They keep you from your friends. You want to make new friends, and they always will find a way. It's like, no, you don't want to get involved with them. There's something wrong with them. They just kind of find ways to, deflect and just keep you isolated, because they want that total control over you.
Okay, everyone, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I have another author with me. Imagine that, a podcast about authors, and I have an author guest. That makes sense. Deborah Griffiths is with me today. Deborah wrote a book, and she's here to share her journey. We have a mutual friend as well, Dominic Damaski. Hi, Dom. And Deborah's here with us today. Hi, Deborah. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much, Dave, for having me on the show. I'm very honored to be here.
Okay, so we chatted before we hit record, and this is your inaugural first podcast episode as a guest. Congratulations.
It is. Thank you. Thank you for being my first.
So during the podcast, please keep all arms and legs within the ride at all times. Okay. Stay seated during the entire podcast recording, just like on a roller coaster. So we're going to have some fun. Okay.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Oh, great. So I'm up here in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. I'm near Niagara Falls. Can you let everybody know where you are in the world?
I am in Rancho Santa Margarita, California. It's a suburb of Orange County, and I'm not that far away from Disneyland, where there's plenty of nice rides that I'm going to keep my arms and legs in.
Has Mickey Mouse ever walked by your house?
No, can't say that he has. Sorry.
I was saying, if you're that close, I'm like, he might just be like one of your neighbors, and he just lives in your neighborhood. That's amazing. Have you been there? Have you been to that wonderful place?
Oh, Disneyland many times. I'm a native Californian, so it's yes. As growing up as a child, it was almost an annual trek, and then as my kids grew, we would always go. And I think the last time, it's been a while. My daughter is actually her birthday is July 17th, which happens to be the same day that Disneyland was actually opened back in the day, back in the 50s. So.
Wow.
We went there one time with her birthday, and she got all the fanfare and stuff. It was really exciting to see.
That's great. That's amazing. Okay, so you have written a book, and it's interesting because this is a topic I haven't talked to anyone about before. So I have lots of questions for you, and I'm really interested about the why behind writing a book, because that tells me a lot about the author. So why is this book important, and why did you write this?
The topic of the book is on gaslighting. It's actually a fictional novel based on true life events. And it's important to me because I don't think enough people know about this. It is verbal abuse, which is a type of domestic violence. According to the Centers for Disease Control, about 46 million women and about 38 million men have admitted to being gaslighted. And it typically is involved in interpersonal relationships, which makes total sense. And I wanted to bring light to it. I wanted to show people what the red flags are and what to avoid in relationships. And if they're in a relationship, I want them to see that it is possible to leave and to rebuild your life successfully. And and I want to empower others at the end of the day. That's my goal, is to bring attention to the matter, highlight the red flags, and empower people to make better choices and get out of those relationships and build a better life for themselves.
Okay, so can we do like a base definition then of gaslighting? Because that's something that I have heard the term, but I'm not completely up to speed on exactly what this entails. Can you please break this down for me and for the listeners?
Sure, it's verbal abuse, and in fact, for many years, it's been known as verbal abuse. More recently, they've termed it gaslighting. It's kind of like the new buzz term, so to speak. It's based off the 1944 movie Gaslight with Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer. And it really is a sense of the gaslighter eliciting control over the other party. And they do it in very subtle ways. Example, in that movie, the husband actually keeps turning down the light, so it's a gas light, keeps turning it down, and the wife is thinking, well, why is it getting darker in here? And he keeps telling her, no, that's your imagination. So that's really a key ploy of what they do, is keep telling you, no, it's all in your mind. It's not real. You're imagining this. There's something wrong with you. That is one ploy that they use. The other ploy, which really happened to me, is the isolation. And they slowly keep you from your family. They keep you from your friends. You want to make new friends, and they always will find a way. It's like, no, you don't want to get involved with them. There's something wrong with them. They just kind of find ways to, deflect and just keep you isolated, because they want that total control over you.
Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so the person that is gaslighting the other person, that person that's actually doing the gaslighting, is looking for control, and that can come from many reasons, I guess. From maybe that person feels a lack of control in their own life, because I've noticed in my circle of friends that if somebody doesn't have control over their life in certain areas, they try to control other people in other situations. So is that similar in the sense for gaslighting?
That is very similar. Like I said, you find it a lot in personal relationships, but you can also find it in the workplace.
Yeah.
Sometimes a boss can be, a little derogatory to employees. Those kind of situations are a little easier to get out of, because, first of all, you don't have that personal connection. And I think what really is hard and with the personal relationships is because we all have that basic need to be loved and to give love. And so when you're in that relationship where you love somebody and they do these things to you, you do take it upon yourself as, well, maybe I'm not loving that person enough, or maybe I'm not lovable. And that's where it can really break down that person's self-esteem, even to the point of suicide, because that's where I was. I did try to commit suicide.
So, wow, like the power of, so what I'm hearing too is the power of suggestion, when you talked about the physical thing of turning the light down and then making you believe that it's not happening. Like that's like mental mind games, and what a controlling atmosphere. I can't imagine that in a married relationship, in a home with the person you're supposed to love and trust and do life with. I can't imagine that being part of my day. I don't know how I would handle that.
I understand, because when I got married, I was young when I was married. I thought I found the one. And, when this starts happening, you make excuses to yourself. It's like, well, maybe I didn't do this right or didn't do that right. But eventually it just keeps going. And I didn't enter the marriage to ever I never thought about divorce. I'm a cradle Catholic. I came from generations of Catholics. Divorce was not in the vocabulary. So even though I was young, I was always committed and believe, and I still do believe this. You marry, it's a sacrament. It's from God. And, why would somebody who said they're Christian or, that they believe in God or that they have these certain values, they really don't at the end of the day, because why would anybody treat anybody like this? But again, it goes to, that person, and they're dealing, like you said, with some type of mental illness. A lot of times, gaslighters are narcissists. And that's another kind of newer term that's coming more into our vocabulary as we learn more and more about these things. So my whole point is to bring light to these issues, get people to have that conversation, and, get help. Whether you're the narcissist or you're the victim, there's help out there. So get the help and, rebuild your life, heal. And because at the end of the day, I still believe we need to be kind to each other. We need to treat each other with respect. I believe God put us here for a reason, and part of that is to be Christ-like in our daily activities, as hard as that walk is from time to time.
Even when people are treating you poorly, yes, for sure,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's a hard path to go down, because it's a little bit easier when people are treating you well to treat them well. So that's quite unique. So for the book, during the process of writing the book, this has got to be extremely personal for you to be able to sit down and collect your thoughts and write this out for people. What did you learn about yourself in the process of writing this book?
I've learned I've come a lot farther than I've ever given myself credit for. The divorce happened like 25 years ago, so it's taken a long time to heal. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Every now and then I've gotten stuck, and when I know I'm stuck, I'm smart enough to go into therapy and work through those issues. But at the end of the day, finally writing it down, it is catharsis. It is healing, but I realized I've come a lot farther than I ever gave myself credit for. There's a couple of very painful chapters in the book, very painful incidents that happened. But and in the past, I would have either avoided even dealing with it, thinking about it, talking about it. But I was able to get through it with hardly, maybe at most, my eyes watered, from remembering that difficulty. So it's not like I'm breaking down crying anymore. I've come a lot farther, and I need to give myself more credit for that, for how far I've come. So hence I found my voice.
You did. I can see your confidence in stating that you have found your voice. What was your community and family like during these days when you were living under this, I would say, a cloud, really, suppression that you're living under? Did you have family members that were aware of what was happening? The community around you? Because you talk about isolation, and how did that all play out then?
I really didn't have my family around. At one point in time, we moved back east, and so my family was still here in California. We had maybe a couple of visits, but I really wasn't allowed to even talk to my mom very much, or hence any kind of visits. So it made it hard, and really, with the neighbors, I didn't have very much interaction with a lot of that. If I wanted to arrange like play dates with kids, because there's some neighbors, your kids are about the same age, it didn't happen. It didn't happen very much. I ended up realizing there was one neighbor I met when we were living back east that we're still friends, and I just kind of started keeping things quiet. I started not telling him I was doing certain things. Like if he had known I was seeing a psychiatrist even during the marriage, he would have flipped because he did not believe in that. So I started to learn not to say things. I don't like being that way. I don't like being secretive, especially to a husband, a spouse that I believe in being, open. But when you have to start being secretive yourself, because you kind of start sensing something's wrong, but you don't know what. But you still need some kind of other interaction. And, became friends with, like I said, a neighbor. And slowly one day after a session, I had actually called my mom and told her, I said, Mom, I'm not happy, but I don't know why. And so her words to me were, I had been praying years for this phone call. So they had sensed something going on, but they did not know the extent. My sister has read the rough draft of this book, and her words were, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. It now explains why we didn't have that interaction and communication all those years. So that's the extent of the isolation.
And in those years, that gap years that you lived through, like those are important times for you as a mother, as a wife, as a spouse, in your community. That's when we connect and build our relationships that take us through our lives, right? So you missed out on creating those relationships in that environment.
I did. I focused a lot on raising my kids. I have 3 kids, two boys and a girl. They're 10 years apart from the oldest to the youngest. But in those years, you do find, I got involved with like PTA just to kind of stay involved with the kids during school. So that gave me a little bit of interaction, but again, not a lot because I'm dealing with kids, not necessarily other adults. So, there were certain things that it was okay to do because, I wasn't really interacting with anybody, in my age group or even in my ex's age group. Another thing that just came to mind is there was an age gap between my oldest and my second child. And my oldest had started going to preschool and gave me some time during the day, and I wanted to go back to work. And his just for a part-time job, and his comment basically was, well, no, you can't do that because you need to keep, my shirts ironed and all, keep the house clean, and you need always have dinner on the table. I mean, it was all these excuses like, okay, I give up. So that's what life was like. Yeah.
So how does isolation feed the control then from your perspective? Why is isolation so important into the control part of this?
For the one who's doing the controlling and the isolation, I think it's because it's not threatening to them. If you do something that's outside of what they like, then they're threatened. And, then it could lead to a lot of anger outbursts. There was incidents of some physical abuse. And, you just start, that's why you start you start shutting down because you don't know what to say, what to do. You're continually walking on eggshells because you don't know what's going to set it off. So the less you say, the less you do, the more at peace the world is in that environment.
And then you have your children on top of this. Mm-hmm. You have a home, right? How were your children impacted through all of this? Because they're seeing mom and dad every day. Have you spoken to them about this?
Oh, yes. My youngest was 4 when I actually left the marriage. My oldest was old enough at the time where the court said that he could decide which parent he could stay with. He chose his dad, and I knew why, because he was the favorite and he thought he would be more beneficial to him. So I had the other 2, and I hated the fact that it split the family, But I knew I needed to make that decision. As I say, I woke up one morning in the psych ward, and the doctor said, "Your environment's making you sick." So I knew I needed to make a change, and I did not want to see my kids in that state. I wanted them to see that they had a strong, loving, confident mother. And third, I didn't want them to be victims of the abuse. Once I started realizing what was happening, I didn't want them to be victims, nor did I want them to learn to victimize others. So I left the marriage, with under those, causes basically. And but during the subsequent years with visitation and stuff, it still was kind of controlling. My oldest started becoming vulnerable to that controlling, the isolation, the verbal abuse. But when he left to go to college, he moved. He moved to the school. My ex then got married. He moved out of state. And granted, I was still living back east at the time, and where all my family and stuff was here in California. So I stayed back east because I still wanted to have that relationship with my oldest, and have him have that relationship with his other two siblings as well. But when he went off to school, and then my ex married, totally moved out of the state, that's when I said, okay, it's time for me to move back to California, where I have some support and I can help at least my other two get healthy and whole and, be productive adults.
Okay.
So that was my journey.
Okay, your book is it's not really it's not a memoir, right? It's a fiction,
No.
right?
It's fiction, right?
Yeah.
It's fiction. It just highlights on some of these incidents, and it entails another woman who, the main character meets in the park, and she suspects this woman is being abused, and so they go back. This Liz is the name, and she talks to Martha, who would be technically the main character, and she asks Martha questions and stuff about what she went through when she realizes that Martha had been in a domestic abuse environment, and just wants to know more about her life, her stories, because there's some tragedy that happens to Liz, the other character, on through the book. So.
Okay, so I'm always interested to find out from authors if there's an author that inspires you, because I'm a musician, so I love to listen to music. When I find a great music or a great song or musician, then that makes me want to go play music. So is there an author that makes you want to go write?
I'm going to go back to my high school years, and I won't say how many years that is. But I had a class, it was on Hemingway and Fitzgerald, and I really love those two authors, both because of the time era that they wrote their stories, number one, but number two, their writings, it's still relatable today. And they both struggled with their own personal demons, and yet were able to create these books, for generations that will enjoy them. Their writings, two different writing styles, but they're like Hemingway can be very simple in his writings, but very, very relatable. And Fitzgerald, I love his passion for his wife, and then describing the Gilded Age, the 20s and that whole time frame. So they're very relatable writings, and I do get inspired by both, by not only just their works, but also who they were as people.
Have you been thinking about writing a fiction book for a long time, or is this something relatively new for you to write fiction?
It is relatively new.
Okay.
I want to say the last few years I've had this, what do you call it? Like angst. It's like there's something that I'm not doing kind of feeling, and I didn't know what. and recently kind of came across a couple of people that I've met that have recently wrote stories of their own, and I'm like, that's interesting. And I know through the years, people have asked me, like, well, how is it that you're dealing with all of these things and yet you're so calm? Well, faith is very important to me, and it's my belief in God that is, I know He is the reason that I'm here. But it just started, two and two started going together. It's like, well, I do have a story, and let me write about it. And so I did some research on writing styles and fiction, nonfiction, biography, and I kind of came up with this premise and went with it. And luckily, I came in contact with a wonderful publisher who's all about motivation, and he's all about everybody's got a story, and we do. You'd be surprised, and I've started telling a little bit about what I'm doing on my social media. I've got Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and I have a lot of people that are very interested in reading this now. And I've had some reach out and say, I have a story. And I said, everybody does, and you'd be surprised. We many times, and I know I'm the first to say this, I didn't say anything about a lot of this because of fear and shame and embarrassment. When we think we're pretty competent people and intelligent people, some of this stuff shouldn't happen to us, or at least that's what we think. But that's not life. That's not reality. Things, just look at the news. I mean, bad things are happening every day to, people, as simple as going to the mall. They go and you have a mall shooting, or the kids that go to school. Every parent sends their kids to school thinking they're safe, and these tragedies happen. So we do have stories. We do, I think we do need to tell our stories to give others hope and inspiration and hopefully some healing. And let's find a better way of living.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I love about fiction, and I'm always curious for an author that writes fiction, is if I was to sit down and write a fiction book right now, I would be lost, because I would be like, I'd get caught up in the details of story arc and character development, and do I start at the end and work my way back to the beginning of the book? Like, if I'm writing a nonfiction, it's an ABC 1, 2, 3, pretty straightforward. Fiction, you can go any way you like, and then all the characters have to cross paths, and you have to build this world. Was that difficult for you to do, or did you find that to be enjoyable?
I actually found it kind of enjoyable, and again, really, it didn't take me that long to write this book. It's only about 5 weeks, and I feel like it was divine intervention in this. But I did actually, I knew the steps that had happened, and so I did an overall outline, and then I started thinking as I was just, figuring out who I am and naming the characters and the ages. And granted, everything is kind of fictionalized, and my kids and neighbors and family members. And then I came up with a kind of like a sub story with meeting this woman in the park, Liz, and intertwining my events with her trying to figure out if she needs to make some decisions in her own life. So it all kind of came together, but basically it started off with an outline and then plotting it, going further into the character developments and then the subplot.
So now that you got through the process, how are your family responding to you writing a book?
They're very supportive. My family and my daughter, who was the youngest, have both read it from cover to cover, and my sons, they know about it, and then the particular chapters where they're more involved in it, I've been very open and communicative about what I wrote and reread it to them, and they're fine. They know the story. They've been part of the story, and all of these years, and they know my commitment of trying to bring more attention to this to help others. And they're all on board on that.
So before we wrap up, I'm just envisioning today as we're talking that, Deborah, there might be somebody listening to this podcast who is in this situation right now. They're listening to this on their headphones. The person that's treating them this way might even be in the room with them as we're talking right now, and they're listening to our conversation. And they are stuck. They don't know what to do. And they have an opportunity to hear from you with all of your experience and everything that you've lived through. What would you say to this person as they're listening to our conversation right now? What's the most important thing they need to know?
That they're not alone. If you feel stuck, if you think you're in this situation, you are not alone. And there is a National Domestic Violence Hotline. I don't have the number in front of me, but you can Google it and reach out to them. They will help you. And in fact, there's even ways of making sure you remove your search history and stuff as you're researching and Googling and stuff. So go to a place where you think you're safe. Even if you go to the grocery store and sit in your car and look into all this and erase your history. There's somebody there at that organization that will help you. I also have a friend that I'm partnering with his foundation. His daughter was brutally murdered in a domestic violence, and it's the Nicole Sincouli Foundation, and there's resources on that website. And I can give you that link afterwards. As well. And, if anybody is brave enough, if you want to send me an email, it's broken to boldness7@gmail.com.
And you're the one answering the email. Yeah.
Yes.
And you'll be the one answering. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that's one other thing they might be a little nervous about. Who's this email going to, and who's going to read this?
Right.
So,
no, it's me. It's me. I'm the only person on that email.
Okay. Can we just give Dominic a little bit of praise? I know you mentioned him a little bit already for his support, but what has it meant for you working with Dom and his team there at Motivation Champs?
He's an absolute gem. I don't know anybody that has been more supportive and more positive and more encouraging in this process. I was lucky enough to meet him about 2 weeks ago. I happened to go to Virginia to celebrate my oldest child's 40th birthday. And now I hadn't seen him in 15 years. Again, because of the situation, the isolation, and, parental alienation all these years. So we've done a lot of healing and stuff with that. But I had the opportunity to meet Dom in person, had a great time. Again, I've never seen anybody so supportive and so encouraging. And he's the first to say, everybody's got a story. Talk about it. We've got to do better to bring the light. We got to bring the light to the world. Our world is too dark. And there's a lot of lights that are shining that are not shining as they should.
This sounds like a good commercial for Dominic. I hope that there's other authors that are debating or trying to figure out a good publisher who'll be in their corner and help them and support them. And I'm taking it from your comments that you would suggest Dominic would be a good choice.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, Dominic has not paid me at all for any of this commercial time, but I hope that there's somebody, right, or yourself. But he's a truly a gentleman, and I've been able to chat with him many times. What I love about Dominic is he'll reach out, just all of a sudden he'll be on your phone, and you're like, Dominic's calling me, and he just wants to encourage you, and I'm like, that's the nicest, most genuine person I've met in a long time. So
very, very
for you to work with him, I'm so happy you got to work with him as well.
Oh, I am too. He's been a godsend. Definitely.
Beautiful. Okay, so the best way to reach you is through email. I believe you said you're working on a website?
I am working on a website. It's going to be broken to boldness.com. So it's under construction, but soon to come.
What kind of resources will be on that website?
I am hoping to put links to like the National Domestic Violence, phone numbers where people can get help, including the phone number for my friend's foundation, because that's another resource. Some, obviously pre-orders for the book, and I'd like it to grow. I would like to know what people leaving these situations, what kind of resources are they looking for? I don't know. Do people even know how to balance a checkbook or do a budget? If you've been isolated for so much, maybe you need some of these kind of skills, or maybe you just need some career help and knowing where to get a job. So these are things that I would like some input from the viewers, what kind of things that they would like to see as well, because I'm here to help.
I love it. That's really great. And for you to offer those resources in a trusted space for someone who needs the help, thank you so much for doing that and for planning that out in the future and what is coming to be. So again, Deborah, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. This was your first podcast interview. Again, so happy that you came on Living the Next Chapter for your first one. I hope it's the first of many. And if you're a podcast host and you want a really great guest, this is her right here. Deborah's here with me. Reach out to Deborah and have her on your podcast. She's super. She's a wonderful guest. I'm so happy to have you on today. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
I've really enjoyed this. I don't know where the time went.
You did a great job, by the way. Well done. Well done. Excellent. Okay, everyone, please check out Deborah's information. We'll have it all in the show notes. And we're looking forward to many great things. Thank you for writing this book, Deborah.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. Wishing you all the best.
Thank you. And to Dominic, we love you, buddy. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Jump over to livingthenextchapter.com, our website, and you will see a spot where you can leave a voice message. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to hear from you. So if you want your voice on this podcast, yes, that's possible. Go to livingthenextchapter.com. Click the little microphone icon. Leave a voice message. And we'll insert your message into the podcast. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us your favorite guest. Maybe there's a guest we should have on the podcast. Maybe you should be our next guest. Leave us a message on livingthenextchapter.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast episode with one person. That's all we're asking. Meet you over there at livingthenextchapter.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to hear from you. Until the next episode, it's coming up right away. Be sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Thank you for supporting our guests. Have a great day.